Hey everyone, it's very lovely to see you all again for another webinar. I'm just letting some people in. We've got a lot to talk about this evening, and if you're not watching live, no worries. You can sort of take your time with this, but we are going into eclipse season, and quite frankly, we're already there. So every 6 months, we have eclipses. And these eclipses, they sort of act as a punctuation to our lives. They can foretell events, they can talk about major milestones. And of course, we'll get into why eclipses are so important and why I'm like kind of a nerd when it comes to eclipses, because eclipses and Saturn, my other favorite thing in astrology, these are like my two go-tos in my astrologer's toolbox, because the eclipses, they really talk about where's the change happening, where's the story happening. Of course, we see some of that with Saturn. Saturn is lessons, Saturn is building, but eclipses really talk about where are these dynamic periods in your life. So these eclipses are going to be in Libra and Taurus, and if you are those two signs, you are in the spotlight. And even if you're not those two signs, you have those two signs somewhere in your astrology. I know I get this every time I talk about astrology. Everybody's like, well, I don't have anything in Libra. I'm not a Libra. Sorry, somebody's just talking about not getting the link, but so there's so every time we have these eclipses, they are highlighting a very particular part of our life. So when we go through each of the 12 signs, you will see where Libra, and in the case of Taurus, where that is located. So just give me 2 seconds. I want to give the link to somebody, because sometimes people don't get it, even though there's some emails and other instructions. So let's continue. So I'm going to start the slideshow. So as I was saying in my introduction, we are in eclipse season, and this is the eclipses of October 2023. So both these eclipses are contained within the month of October. And that tells me as an astrologer, and it tells you as a result, that October is going to be a month of change. Why? Well, we're going to learn about why eclipses do bring changes. They bring major personal milestones, and what we have to expect going not just into the month of October, but beyond October. Because that's the funny thing about eclipses, is that even though the sort of the mark of change is going to be with the solar eclipse on October 14th, or even the lunar eclipse on October 28th, it's very possible that you've already seen the change or seen the event. And this is going to be part of a series of eclipses that takes us into the beginning of 2025. But with the lunar eclipse that we'll learn about in Taurus, we are closing out a dynamic chapter that we saw begin in 2021. So as I record this, it is October 5th, and we are 1 week away from the eclipses. Like I said, we're already starting to feel it. And, for me as an astrologer, when I look at the year, I look at where are the eclipses, where are the nodes, where's Saturn, what's the big story of the year? And because the eclipses have started to change, I mean, they're going into new signs, it means that we are now going into a new story. For those that don't know who I am, I know I saw some familiar faces on the live webinar, but for those that don't know who I am, my name is Katie Sweetman. I'm an astrologer and psychic medium located here in the New York City area. So maybe some of you watch my weekly videos, maybe some of you are my clients, but I've been actually doing professional astrology since about 2010, 2011, but my interest in astrology goes back way further. It goes back to my first Saturn opposition, age 14, 15, when I really saw my first astrology chart, and thus began, I guess, a lifelong love affair with astrology and even Saturn. I am a psychic medium. That part does come into my work. This is more about astrology, I guess, today. But a few times a year we do webinars, and it's a good way to really kind of give more time and space to what's going on in the heavens. So this is our agenda for today, and it's kind of familiar structure if you've joined an eclipse webinar in the past, but we have some new perspectives. And let's get into our introduction. So, ooh, going back too fast. There we go. Eclipses open a doorway. So when we start to learn more about eclipses and our time together, maybe you already know this, it is when the sun crosses the moon or vice versa, and there's sort of this stopping point and beginning point. Eclipses, they bend time, they open up something to come into your life. They are, for me, very fascinating. And so we're in this period of time that may feel like, to some of you, especially if you're a little bit more sensitive, like a doorway, a portal. Time bends and speeds up, and it's something that I've noticed, that time, which is an energy, it's something that we don't always think about, time being an energy, but time expresses itself through each of the 12 zodiac signs, through the new moon, the full moon, and then every 6 months we get to the eclipses, and time gets a little weird, and we sort of come to a personal crossroads. And maybe you've started to notice that maybe a certain area of your life is demanding more of your attention right now. Fortunes rise and fall, and I am a little bit more of a humanistic astrologer, but fate, even though it's a complicated word, there are forces that are greater than us. Pay attention to what's happening in the news right now, just as a sort of an objective exercise. Whose star is rising? Whose star is falling? It is classic eclipse things happening. I think it was like I think it was last year when we were having all those Scorpio Taurus eclipses, and there was a lot of triggers in the summer of 2022, and it was like a prime minister or a president was stepping down, and there was all these big changes in government. But even in your own life, see who's going up and who's going down at this time. You've heard me say this, every 6 months eclipses happen, and they track a story that actually unfolds over a larger period of time. This is not the first time that we've had eclipses in Libra, nor eclipses in Taurus. Well, we've had eclipses in Taurus since November 2021, but 9 years before that, 18 years before that, and so forth and so forth. And so these eclipses are actually picking up on a story, when you start to look for it, that's bigger than this exact moment. One of the metaphors I use in trying to explain eclipses is that it's like there's this room, it's your life, or it's a very particular part of your life. Maybe it's relationships, maybe it's career. And the curtain comes down on one act, the curtain comes up on another. Or maybe it's like you close the door, but the room was in a certain order, or there were certain people in the room. Close the door, open the door after the eclipse. The room's rearranged, there's new people, or there's a new setting. It sounds a little bit like magic, but that's kind of the energy of eclipses, that people can rush in and out of your life. Events can happen quite quickly. That's not to say that this is going to be the case for each and every one of you that are listening or watching, but it's sometimes like textbook astrology. And like I said, to that point, eclipses can portend sudden shifts in events. I think it's a worthwhile exercise in your own time. Like, what was going on in 2014, 2015? That was the last time we had eclipses in Aries and Libra. What was going on in, just checking to make sure everybody's got the link, what was going on in 2004 and 2005. That was the last time, before that we had eclipses in Aries and Libra. Give or take, there was one eclipse in Aries in 2013. There was one eclipse in Libra, and I'm just gonna, Just make sure you have your mics and your videos off, otherwise you're going to get a starring role in the recording. Yeah, there was a lunar eclipse in Libra in March of 2016. So that said, like, go back to those periods of your life. What did you see? That's not to say that it's going to be a repeat of those times, but certainly thematically that area of your life is being activated again. Concepts already. Eclipses remind us that our forces that are greater than us. That's the thing. And you hear me say this in my weekly video, the astrology is 50%. You are the other 50%. But I can't, the singular human being, I can't control the weather. I can't control the cosmos. I can't control the rotation of the planets. It's just to be in respect, or even just to kind of witness that there's something that's bigger than me that's unfolding in my life. Of course, I can take awareness. I can like try to, take positive action to support that area of my life. But it's also just to know that, we're working with something that's much bigger than us. And eclipses are vortices of energy. It's like that comment about a doorway, a portal, a gateway. Things are coming in and out of our life. Life is a bit charged at the moment. I don't know what you're feeling. Maybe something very particular is happening in your life. Maybe you're scratching your head and being like, Katie, nothing's happening. Okay, well, we'll see. We'll see what's gonna happen. Our connection to the sun and the moon, the twin forces of life, is momentarily cut. The sun gives us life. The moon is the other side of the coin. It's the yin to the sun's yang. It talks about our emotions, our subconscious, our memories, sort of these threads that connect us. And for a moment, it's cut. The ancients, and I think I make this point in another part of the webinar, the ancients feared eclipses. And I'm not saying, of course, we shouldn't fear eclipses. This eclipse on the 14th is like right on my midheavens, right on my Pluto. But I'm just like, you know what? We're just gonna go with it. But something, and I've said this before, and maybe it's a little bit of an unpopular opinion, like I personally don't go out and look at the eclipse. I don't stand under that energy because it's powerful. And I think the ancients knew it's powerful. It was powerful for a reason. But that's just my own personal, you do you. And I know that the solar eclipse, for example, is visible in the United States. It's an annular solar eclipse. But personally, I'm not going to go outside and stare at the sky, but you do you. Just making sure everybody has the link. We are good to go. So eclipses activate a certain part of your chart. When we get into each of the 12 signs, or maybe you know your own astrology already, it's to really know where is Libra in your chart. Keep in mind, you are all 12 signs of the zodiac. You're not just your sun sign. The zodiac represents the totality of life as it was represented at the moment that you were born, which is a symbol of your life, the totality of your life. So Libra has to be someplace in it. And in some cases, it might be a career sign, it might be a health sign, and it might even be, of course, your sun sign. So we're going to sort of see a bigger story that maybe have been running through different months, different weeks, and even different years. I personally feel that just knowing where the eclipses are, of course, to be in sort of a witness or to be at peace, and just to know that there's a reality of change. I know that there is going to be an eclipse on my midheaven. That might be a technical detail for some of you, but I'm just in the reality that something about my professional life, something about duties and responsibilities, something about the axis of my life, because midheaven is an angle, is shifting, it's changing. And that's just a reality for me. The sun and the moon, divine alchemy. The sun and the moon, the sun, are the yin and yang of creation. These two energies, in astrology at least, they are what are called the lights, the luminaries. The sun gives life, the moon reflects life. So these two energies, and this is sort of maybe a little bit of a tangent, in astrology, sometimes, especially because of sun sign astrology, there's sort of this hierarchy where the sun is at the top, but actually the sun and the moon are cohorts, they're consorts, they're together. They just sort of two sides again of the same coin. They are the two most important planets in astrology. And maybe if you're newer to astrology, you've not really thought much about your moon sign. The moon sign's a little bit more difficult to look up. Often you can find it if you know your birth date, but sometimes if the moon changes signs, you could be a different moon sign. But the moon is just as important as the sun, but they talk about two different facets, two very different important facets of life. So it's just an image to sort of put us into this energy, the sun, the solar, it's visible, it gives light, and the moon and the full moon in this case, it reflects life. It's intuitive. It gets into memories, subconscious memories, sense, past memories, and even family and home and childhood, and even past lives, if that's something that you believe in. They are symbolic mother, moon, and father that gives life to everything. So every 2 weeks, we have a new moon. This is like clockwork. And every 2 weeks after that, we have a full moon. The lunar month is actually 29 and a half days. So it starts with the new moon. A week later, we have the first quarter moon. We have the full moon a week after that. 3 weeks later, it's the last quarter moon, and then the whole cycle begins again with the new moon. And so the cycle continues again and again, and this act of the sun and the new moon and the full moon, it begins to create sort of this energetic, thematic reality. And I sort of argue that it weaves our reality. It kind of creates these threads for us to live through this container of the lunar month. But the lunar month is actually a container of time. And as I said, in a moment ago, the lunar cycle weaves our energetic reality. So every 6 months, that energetic reality, that weaving, is punctuated by the eclipses. So we sort of have these macro containers of time that starts with the solar eclipse. In this case, going back 6 months from this recording, we go to the solar eclipse of April 20th. 2023, and that one was in Aries, and that opened up a chapter that was lived through the archetype of Aries. Aries is the I, the self, leadership, moving forward, taking action. It's Mars, it's bravery, courage, it's self, it's singularity. Aries can be a little bit hot-headed and a little bit fast, a little bit ill-tempered. It's just the other side of Aries. And so for you in your own time to reflect over the past 6 months, where were you called to take action? Where were you called to be the leader, to really focus on the self and your individuality? Because astrology is just energy, maybe it's hard for us to be an individual. Maybe it's hard for us to stand up for ourselves or stand on our own 2 feet. And we really had to work with that narrative from a different perspective. And then we go into these different new and full moons that happen in between the, let's say the Aries solar eclipse of April 20th, and then the Libra solar eclipse of October 14th of 2023. And each of the new and full moons between them over the past 6 months, they talked about these different chapters in this larger chapter. The lunar cycle plays off of the energies of Saturn. I don't know if you saw in that previous slide where it said the lunar month is 29 and a half days. Well, Saturn takes 29 and a half years to go around the sun. And so Saturn is matter, it's manifestation, it's sort of these concrete energies. The lunar energies are not concrete, but we need them both in order to support life and to support manifestation. Again, the lunar month is 29 days and Saturn's cycle is 29 years. And it's kind of to that point where eclipse and the nodes, they really speak to these larger themes of karma and fate and events. And these are also things that we can see with Saturn's energies. Life manifests and takes form under the energies of the new and full moon. So let's go back 4 weeks ago. We had a new moon in Virgo. So we were just about to wrap up this container of time where we lived that container of time through the archetype of Virgo. So for each and every one of us, we had to get into themes of work, projects, health, wellness, putting things back into order, or looking at systems. For example, again, each and every one of us has our own relationship with the archetype of Virgo. Everything's a mess, or we love to put things in order, or maybe Virgo is a career sign and very much focused on career over the last 4 weeks. But now we are going into a new container of time with that Libra solar eclipse on October 14th. Like I said, eclipses are an energy that's bigger than us, the force of time, these cosmic forces, but we can sort of sit with them and not be fearful. And I'm saying this because sometimes I get people that are showing up on my doorstep during eclipse season and they're freaking out because they heard that there's an eclipse. And I'm like, it's okay, it's fine. It's just life. Life is just gonna life. So just to sort of sit with these archetypical energies, in this case, the archetypical energies of Libra, relationships, partnership, and connection, and to work to bring a positive and healthy relationship with this archetype over the next 6 months. But again, eclipses are the hand of fate. And sometimes life can turn on a dime, and sometimes our star rises, sometimes our star falls, and it's just something that's bigger than us. Part 3, what are eclipses? Just letting some more people in. So we got to do a little bit of astronomy. I think I say this every time. I say it in other webinars, is that astrology is first astronomy. It's important, I think even important on just to be a human being and a citizen on this planet, to know the actual scientific mechanism behind eclipses. So an eclipse is either where the light of the sun or the light of the moon is blocked by another object. So in the case of this, kind of 17th century image, the light of the sun is blocked by the moon. That's solar eclipse. But on the right side of the 17th century image, the Earth blocks the light of the sun, which creates the lunar eclipse. And thanks to NASA, we have some very handy graphics. Maybe you saw this graphic in one of my previous webinars, but it's for you to see, like, this is the mechanism of what an eclipse looks like from space. And this is to show the ecliptic plane. So this is where the moon is crossing the shadow of the sun and where we would get a lunar eclipse. Thanks, NASA. During a solar eclipse, the moon partially or totally blocks the light of the sun. During a lunar eclipse, the Earth blocks the light of the full moon. So in the case of the eclipses in October, the solar eclipse, gotta get the math right. The moon is passing in front of the sun, but it's not completely blocking out the sun. So it's what's called a ring of fire eclipse, an annual eclipse. So you'll see that sort of this ring of the sun is still visible with the eclipse in October. The lunar eclipse, that's actually on October 28th, is a partial eclipse. So only part of the moon's light will be occulted, so you'll only see part of that red energy that the lunar eclipse is famous for. And I really think it's only in the last 10 years that we started saying blood moon eclipse. I don't know, like, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So it's just a terminology I don't use because I don't think it's helpful. Again, more fun graphics from NASA. This is showing the moon passing in front of the sun, and this is what an eclipse looks like from Earth, as opposed to we saw it what it would look like from space. And this is, I believe, another image of an eclipse. And then this is a time lapse of a lunar eclipse as it happens. The beauty of astrology is that astrology and science and mathematics, they have a long history together, and it's really only in the last 400 so years where you see that separation. But you know, there was this impetus, or rather, I think, a necessity to really know where eclipses were going to be, because they were seen as ill fortune. So the scientists, the astronomers, they would be like, "Oh, there's going to be an eclipse on this date." And so that said, in modern times, you know, we don't have to worry about eclipses, but we know that where they're going to happen, because the new or the full moon is within a certain amount of degrees of the lunar nodes. And I did a whole 2-hour webinar back in August on the lunar nodes and why they are the axis of fate. And that might be worth checking out. The lunar nodes, and I'm just saying this in case you've never heard this before, the lunar nodes, even if you've never even heard of the lunar nodes, I'm not going to get too deep into lunar nodes because that would be a whole other webinar, and it was. But the lunar nodes are not physical; they are mathematical points. And to that point, this is something that was on Wikipedia, but it just shows you that the sun, which is the S, the green dot is the Earth, the blue dot, depending on how small your device is, that's the moon. And depending on all these different rates of rotation, there's a point, it's called the ascending node, the descending node, that tells us where an eclipse will happen. So this is why we can plot the lunar nodes mathematically. But astrology is the symbolic interpretation of astronomy. And within astrology, the lunar nodes create a powerful axis that can turn our lives in a new direction. Let's go a little bit deeper into the lunar nodes. Again, for an eclipse to happen, a new or a full moon has to line up within a certain amount of degrees from the lunar nodes. Fun fact, the lunar nodes move backwards through a sign. So as of July of 2023, so just a few months ago, the nodes are now in Aries and Libra. Before that, they were in Taurus and Scorpio. I don't know if that makes sense, but they're moving backwards because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, Taurus is the second sign, so it went from the second to the first. And it will spend 18 and a half months in a sign. So we know that over the next 18 months, although at this point it's a little bit less than that, that the signs of Aries and Libra will be the spaces for the eclipses until the beginning of 2025. Although we will have an eclipse in Pisces on September 17th or 18th of 2024. The lunar nodes are referred to by the ancients as the head and the tail of the dragon, because the ancients would see something would devour the sun or something would devour the moon. Again, when we put the lunar nodes in our own astrology, they become an axis of fate. So wherever Aries is, wherever Libra is, those two signs are opposite from one another always. And so these two signs occupy a space in your chart, in your life, in your own astrology. And that's where things are happening into 2025. And then the story will change. We'll go into Pisces and Virgo. Basic wisdom is that the North Node moves us forward. It's bringing us into new territory. Sometimes the story is a little bit more complicated, but from a very rudimentary level, North Node is forward, South Node is the past, is what we're leaving behind. It's funny how events will start to line up with this axis, and maybe this is a little bit of a dramatic example of a client who wanted to know like about these eclipses. And she also said, oh, I had a car accident in August. And I'm like, all right, give me the dates, give me the details. And the moon was at the degree of the October 14th eclipse. So this is in August, September, 3 months before. And the moon was a trigger for a future eclipse. I realize it's a dramatic example because I don't want you always to all think that this is going to be a car accident. Of course not. But it just so happened that that was what the eclipse was for her. So you, if you're very astute with your astrology, you may start to see that there have been events happening, whether the moon is in Aries or Libra, whether there's a planet there, although we haven't had anything in Aries. We had a full moon in Aries, just I think it was the 30th or 29th of September. And we do have Mars in Libra, and we've had Mars in Libra since the end of August. So we were getting a little preview of the eclipses in September before October. Again, as of July 2023, I think it was like the 18th or the 22nd, I can't remember, of 2023, the North Node is in Aries and the South Node is in Libra. Bit of a change from the North Node being in Taurus and Scorpio since January of 2022. Aries and Libra are the relational axis in astrology. Every sign of the zodiac has a sign that's opposite. And sometimes we think, oh, opposite, bad. No, they're just complements. And Aries talks about the I, the individual, the self. We need that. We need to find our individuality. We need to know who we are. We need to have agency and self-power and determination. But we can't overly do that. We need Libra to balance it out, no pun intended, because Libra is the scales, because Libra says we need people. We're actually genetically hardwired to socialize, to be in groups, to form alliances, to have families, to have partnerships, however you want to define relationship and partnership for you. But we can't overly rely on relationships, so we need to make sure that we have a sense of autonomy and individuality. It's a dance, and so that's where a lot of that dance is happening for everybody into the beginning of 2025. So we're in a time where we're examining the contrast between who we are, our individuality, and how we show up in relationships. And the South Node is in Libra, so we need to, I don't know if you remember from a previous slide, the South Node is the past. It's something that's, the South Node is like a well of memory and instinct. It's unfinished business, it's past lives, if you believe in that. And so there's something from our past and a past pattern and past relationships where we need to either break free and really find our autonomy, find our individuality, or be in relationship in a way that allows us space to be ourselves. A lot of times, and we're human beings, in relationships, we lose ourselves. It becomes all about what the other person wants, and we sort of little by little capitulate our needs, our wants, and our desires. The North Node's in Aries, so we have to sort of remind ourselves that it can't just be so Libra over the next 6 months. There has to be balance. We have to make sure we sort of are able to really individuate and have our freedom, even if it's a long-term relationship, even if we continue in that relationship, for example. So a story that began in November of 2021 is coming to a close. There was a lunar eclipse in Taurus on November 19th at 2021. I believe it was that 27 or 28 degrees of Taurus. But honestly, I feel that story started to come in even as early as end of July, August 2021. So that story is beginning to come to a close. And over the last 2 years, a story was woven through the signs of Taurus and Scorpio, through the archetypes of Taurus and Scorpio. Taurus and Scorpio are the the material axis in astrology. Taurus is an earth sign. It's the first earth sign. It talks about our material world, our material needs. Nothing wrong with that. We're physical beings. And Scorpio is also the other side of that. It's money and power and finance. It gets into themes about value and worth. Do I have enough? Do I have everything I need? What's my relationship with resources? But it wasn't easy, I think, with those eclipses in Scorpio, because they really brought up a lot of deep emotions. And Taurus is the fertility of life. It's the rebirth of life after spring. Scorpio is the decay of life. And these two twin powerful forces that exist in our own lives, and certainly by the seasons, regardless of where we are on the planet. The lunar eclipse on October 28th could be, we'll see, it could be a punctuation on a story that began in 2021. Maybe something, it's just to go back in your own time. It's like, what was going on in 2021, particularly October, November? What were the themes? Were there themes about money and income? Were there themes about value, worth, ownership, property, stability, security? And maybe if these two signs are very important signs in your own astrology, you know what areas were highlighted. So here we are, we're starting to we are coming to an end. But now another story is starting to come into focus, and that story first began in April of 2023. So we had that first eclipse in this series, April 20th, 2023. Maybe in your own time, like what was going on in April and May, and like even into the beginning of the year when the sun was in Capricorn, so 3 months before the eclipses, have you started to see a change in narrative? Maybe it's not obvious. I think we're still like early in the story between Aries and Libra, and I think it's really 2024 where we get more information about what this time means for us. But there will be one more eclipse in I think it's a solar eclipse in Aries in late March of 2025. Traditionally, meaning according to the ancients, and certainly traditional astrology, views eclipses as a malefic event. A malefic event means that it's a source of ill fortune. And I just wanted to say that just to sort of put a lot of things on the table, because, you know, if you think about it, it's 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, longer. And you watch as the daytime turns to night. The ancients really saw that as an ill omen. And even to look up at the moon turns this color red, and like, what does that mean? But the eclipses actually can talk about the changes in your life, the major milestones, a marriage, birth of a child, a move, a fresh start. And sometimes in the case of people who, for example, are really in the news right now, they've had a major life event, and even like maybe it could be a promotion, for example, you will see the eclipses all over it, for example. Because I'm an astrologer that likes to watch biographies and like look up people's data and like try to piece together, even if I don't have the birth time, because, you know, I'm a nerd. Part 5, intersecting arcs of time. I said this before, I believe, but the lunar nodes have an 18.6-year cycle and a half cycle of 9 years. So that's why I said go back to 2014, 2015. Go back to 2004, 2005, and even 9 years before that, and 9 years before that, 9 years before that, if you're older. And where do you start to see patterns, for example? The solar eclipse that is on October 14th of 2023, there was a solar eclipse on October 14th of 2004, 21 degrees of Libra. What was going on in October of 2004, I can tell you exactly what was going on in my life. I was planning for a move to New York. I was living in DC, which is Washington, DC, where I'm from originally. I'm from Maryland. And long story short, I made this big, bold life decision to move to New York, and I honestly didn't know anybody. I kind of knew a couple of people who became my roommates, but it was sort of this big, like bigger than me, eclipses, just push to move my life to New York. And that summer I was back and forth interviewing, looking for jobs. I had a very a boss who was very accommodating of my desire to completely uproot my life, and she let me go to job interviews. And but I think it was that October, and it was November 13th that I got to New York and moved my life from Maryland. So that eclipse changed my life. And I really, that 2004, 2005 was a massive time in my life. And so the logic is, well, it's like, well, 21 Libra must be prominent in your astrology. And sure enough, it's my midheaven is that 16 Libra, and then my IC is that 16 Aries. The lunar eclipse that's on October 28th of this year, same degree, October 28th, 2004, 5 degrees of Taurus. So it's not to say that events, I'm not going to already live in New York, I'm not going to make a big move. I mean, who knows? Who knows? But I'm not planning to make a big move. But it's worth to see where there's an echo, there's a thread, there's a similar theme between this time 18, 19 years ago and where things are now. To 2014, 2015, the eclipses, as you heard me say previously, were in Aries and Libra, but they were reversed. So at that time, the North Node was in Libra, the South Node was in Aries. Also, a powerful time in my life. It's when my own spiritual path and my spiritual practice came into my life. My whole life changed. Probably not very like visibly, but certainly, you know, internally that changed massively in 2014 and 2015. Eclipse energy can start to present itself a month or so before. This is, for me, as an astrologer, fascinating. Again, in the example of the client that I told you about with the accident in August, or even, you know, a friend who is expecting the birth of a child. That I'm pretty sure that the eclipse on the 21 degrees, I'm trying to think of his ascendant. It's mid, I think it's like 15. Aries-Libra, but that like the event already happened, the pregnancy already happened. It's sort of telling you, hey, get ready, your life's going to change. This is something that not other astrologers talk about. It's just something that I've noticed, is that the midpoint of the eclipses, 3 months before, 3 months after, it can really show the eclipse. So for you, like, what was going on in end of June, July? How did that sort of give you a preview of events in October and even September, for example? These eclipses may come and go, and you're like, well, that was a lot of, you know, hype for nothing. And maybe you get to Capricorn season, end of December, beginning of January, and you see that theme around relationships or self or individuality really come into the forefront. Eclipses and cycles of the moon thread together different points of time. So like I said, 2004, 2023, and maybe other times when 21 Libra or even 5 Taurus was highlighted, it sort of threads us back to different points in time. Everything is connected. Time is a circle. It's actually probably more of a spiral, and certainly, and that goes with the image that I showed you earlier of the dragons, the 2 dragons, is that the eclipses over an arc of, like, you know, almost 2,000 years will plot their course. Like, it's the kundalini of the earth around the earth as they go from the North Node to the South, North Pole to the South Pole, South Pole to the North Pole. And I think the eclipse of October 14th is a Saros series that started in like 1200. So there's a birth of the eclipse series, and it could be 2,000 years before. But that's not 2,000 years, but just math hard. So when we zoom out, we can see how similar themes play out over time. So I've been saying this, and I've had a couple of people message me and be like, "Oh my God, like I know you said like look for the eclipse," and I can see how it's shown up into these different points of time. Eclipses mark the time and hours of our lives. This is why, like, I try to reframe eclipses beyond the more ancient definition of eclipses as a malefic event. People are like, when, I'm an astrologer, people are like, when am I gonna get in a relationship? When am I gonna get married? I don't know. When is this gonna happen? Okay, well, let's see where the eclipse is. Because the eclipses at least tell me that something's changing. It doesn't give me a slam dunk. I truly believe that astrology will never give you 100% clarity. That's just the mystery of life. But we know that a certain area is highlighted, whether it's relationships, whether it's somebody that wants to start a family, looking for the eclipses and pregnancy, somebody wants to move, and even having a talk with a client yesterday, that eclipse was on the part of the chart that talks about home and family. And there's a couple of other indications through the eclipses and through some other events that there's the potential of a move. And she's like, I'm not planning on moving. I'm like, all right, well, you'll have to get back to me. Maybe it's an internal move. So part 6, the eclipses of October 2023. So as you've been hearing me saying throughout our time together, that these eclipses are a major focus on relationships. Why? Because Libra, the 7th sign of the zodiac, is a relationship sign. The whole of the zodiac represents the totality of life, birth, death, relationships, health, duties and responsibilities. And so Libra is the archetype that talks about how we socialize, interact, relate to one another, find compromise, and negotiate. Libra is the sign of peace. Aries is the sign of war. I'm not saying there's going to be war and peace over the next however many months, but it's just, these are root archetypes that are part of creation. It's a need to make commitments and build connection. The solar eclipse has Venus and Virgo opposite Saturn and Pisces. And Saturn actually loves relationships. Saturn is exalted in Libra. This might be a little bit technical for people, but Saturn reminds us that we can't do life alone. We need other people. We, as human beings, we need to build alliances. We need partnership, connection, because it creates stability and it actually ensures our survival. And life can't be the lone wolf. Saturn is in its detriment in Aries. But there's something about having to get real, having to get clear, and sort of the question mark about Saturn and Pisces is, how a relationship can really connect to something deeper. Pisces is a very spiritual sign, and having to make a commitment to somebody, whether it is a relationship, it needs to come from like a bigger place than us. But also Saturn shows us where a relationship is not working, for example. Open up to deeper emotional connections. So Venus and Virgo is going to make a nice trine to Jupiter and Taurus. I don't like to overpromise trines, but trines are an opportunity. So there's an opportunity within relationships, all relationships, not just romantic relationships, over the next 6 months to have to foster, to build, to open up to a deeper emotional connection. As you've heard me say, it's closure from a story from 2021, as we have our last eclipse in Taurus that acts like a punctuation mark. This is going to be a south node solar eclipse. The solar eclipse is at 21 degrees. I believe the nodes are around 25 degrees, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a south node eclipse, past memories, patterns, relationships from the past. Needing to wrap something up, needing to tie up loose ends, maybe even to rekindle an old relationship. It's a look at the shadow side. So the solar eclipse is actually going to make a square to Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto does turn direct, I think right before the solar eclipse. So we've got this Plutonian energy. Pluto is the sign, not the sign, it's the planet that makes us look at ourselves, look at our psyche, look at our shadow, look at our blocks, look at the unconscious, meaning the things that we can't see. Like, well, Katie, how can I see something that I can't see? Pluto tries to give us clues. It's like the thing that's right in front of our face. It's how a relationship or relationships plural can be a mirror for something within ourselves that we're not acknowledging. Maybe it's our part in a negative relationship pattern. Maybe it's something that we're not even on a positive level acknowledging about ourselves. This is kind of like Pluto's last gasp, or one of Pluto's last gasps in Capricorn. It will go back into Aquarius in January. It does go back into Capricorn in September, and then back into Aquarius in November of 2024. And maybe even frank conversations, bold opinions, and revelations. So the lunar eclipse on October 28th is Mercury and Scorpio opposite Jupiter and Uranus and Taurus, and even Mars in Scorpio too. I should have put that in as well. This is a pretty spicy lunar eclipse at the end of the month, and it may mean that we need to talk about things that normally we don't talk about. Scorpio is a sign that's very revealing. It talks about secrets, it talks about taboo, it talks about the reality that's beyond the Libra veneer. And there may need to be a purge of something that we've been holding on to because we've been sort of keeping it. We want to put up a good face and not really talk about how we really feel, for example. Mars is going to be in Scorpio during these eclipses, and I'm saying this as a Scorpio. Mars is powerful because it's in its home sign. Mars rules Scorpio, so this is a lunar eclipse that's hitting on themes around trust, intimacy, control, power, transformation, even money and finance, property and assets. There's a need to let go, find grace, or find forgiveness. Venus will make an opposition to Neptune with the lunar eclipse. And a Venus opposite Neptune is a need to sort of Neptune talks about transcendence. We need to transcend something. It's part of our own personal and collective spiritual work. And whether it's to heal something, especially that sense of purging and letting something go with with all that confrontational energy with Taurus and Scorpio, how do we forgive? How do we become at peace with something? How do we release something from the past? And like I said, this eclipse on the 28th is the last eclipse in this series of eclipses that have been going back and forth since 2021. However, even though it closes a story, we've got this broader chapter, this larger story that's been with us since 2018, 2019, because those were the years that Uranus went into Taurus. If you are a Taurus, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, it's like your life is not what it was in 2018, 2019. There's an area of our life, wherever Taurus is, that does not look the same as it did 4 or 5 years ago. And so there's going to be these two overlapping series with these eclipses. The list on the left, these are the eclipses, and maybe this is for people who don't have this information. The column on the left, these are the eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio that we've had since 2021. But as you can see, the last one on the list is the 20th of October. That's 3 weeks from now. The column on the right is going to be the Aries-Libra eclipses from 2023 to 2025. So these are the future eclipse dates to mark in your calendar. Here is the path of the October 14th solar eclipse. As you can see, it makes an arc over the western United States, throughout the Yucatan, going over Panama and throughout South America. I think that's Colombia and Brazil, if I'm doing my geography correctly. So this is that line is the place of the greatest eclipse, and where if you're in the United States or wherever, you'll see the ring of fire. For me, I'm on the East Coast of the United States. I'm in the New York City area, so I'll only be able to see part of the solar eclipse. If you are in anywhere else, you will not be able to see the solar eclipse unless you hop on a plane. And here is the path of the lunar eclipse. So the like I said, it's a partial lunar eclipse. So only part of the moon is getting that red color that the full moon has become a bit famous for on the internet for, and it's visible over Europe and Africa, Southeast Asia, and looks like, I don't know, it's like parts of Indonesia. I'm trying to remember what that country is below Vietnam, but anyway. That's the lunar eclipse. This is to see the chart of the eclipse. This might be a little bit technical for some of you, or maybe not. The solar eclipse is going to be again on October 14th. It's going to be at 1:56 p.m. Eastern time, so East Coast United States, since that's 10:56 a.m. Pacific time, West Coast of the United States. And so that, of course, for those in Australia, this is going to be the October 15th. This is the first eclipse in that's going to be in Libra. We will have a lunar eclipse in Libra next year, and then I think that's it for the series. I think the rest of the eclipses are in Aries, and then we have that sort of one eclipse next September in Pisces. So this is going to turn our attention towards relationship. And I got like a funny comment on my YouTube, which I post my Facebook Live on YouTube. And it was sort of this comment like, well, I live in the woods and I have no friends. And I, apart from wanting to give that person a hug, it's just, but relationships just as an archetype exist in your life. Even if you're in the woods and you have no friends, there may be a pull or a desire to reevaluate this part of your life. Maybe you're like, you know what, maybe in the woods it's not working for me. Or maybe you're like, you know what, I don't like people. Or maybe you're like, how do I bring the right people with me into the woods? It's going to be relevant for your own life. But it's not just, and this is something that I say on my lives, it's not just capital R relationships. So, you know, your marriages, your serious relationships, your people that you live with, it's going to be your small R relationships as well. It's a need to socialize, connect and interact, but also to look back in your own life. What's in the way of that? Where are things complicated? What needs to be released or healed? There will be themes around service to others or a need to put things back into order. Venus, which is the ruler of the eclipse, is in Virgo. With the Venus opposition to Saturn, there may be a reality check. There may be a need to take on some sort of duty and responsibility with people or in a relationship to make a commitment to another person. Again, there's going to be a square to Pluto. So we got that Pluto energy that's with us over the next 6 months. And, you know, to be fair, relationships have a shadow side. It's where we manipulate. It's where we allow ourselves to be manipulated. It's where there's toxic relationship patterns, where somebody, you know, we sort of keep attracting certain people into our life. And so maybe this is a period over the next 6 months where we have to do our work. That red dot is where the eclipse is. So that's the sign of Libra, and that's the symbol for the sun and the moon. That is the opposition between Venus and Saturn. And then we also have Pluto. That's a square. It's pretty close square. So Pluto is a big player in the astrology. And now this is the chart of the lunar eclipse at 5 degrees of Taurus. So this is going to be on October 28th, 2023 at 4:24 p.m. Eastern, 1:24 p.m. Pacific. This will be October 29th for those in Australia. And even in it'll be almost midnight in London, and it'll be the 29th for those in Europe. So this is an ending. It's a coda, it's a postscript. It sort of closes out something, but ironically, we still have Uranus and Taurus. So we still have a story with us while Uranus is in Taurus, 2018, 2019, all the way to 2025 and 2026. This is going to be the last eclipse in Taurus and Scorpio until 2031. So we will all be space robots by then. That larger story that's been with us since 2018, 2019, even though this eclipse is not, I don't know if you can see the Uranus is at 21 degrees and the eclipse is at 5 degrees. That's not a conjunction in a technical way, but I think they're talking to each other. And so we may see elements of awakening or surprise or something that wants to shake things up with this lunar eclipse later this month. With this energy of Mars and Jupiter really prominent with the eclipse, with Mercury, there may be something to either make a leap of faith, take action, stand up for our convictions, get very, kind of what we believe in and what we stand for example. And this eclipse is going to bookend an eclipse from October 25th, 2022. So last year, that eclipse was at 2 degrees. And so this eclipse is at 5 degrees. They're just opposite ends of the sky. And just to, what was going on in October, November of 2022, and how you see some echoes or threats right now. Those two dots show you where the sun and the moon are for this eclipse. We have the an exact opposition between Mars and Jupiter. We have the Venus opposite Neptune. Neptune's kind of a funny influence. I've just noticed when Neptune plays a strong part of the astrology, there's a lot of emotions that come up, a lot of water, something that really asks us to transcend our human personal level and try to open up to our higher self or our universal level. And there's a Saturn at the very beginning of Pisces. It is making a trine to the sun and a sextile to the moon. So I think that there's an opportunity, even if anything shakes up, to create a new framework, a new structure, and new stability. Oh, and that's where Uranus is in relation to the moon. So let's look, I'm sure this is what you all have been waiting for. Let's look at the eclipses through the signs. So one of you may be saying, I'm just going to kind of head you off at the pass. What if my nodes are in Aries and Libra? If your north node is in Aries and if your south node is in Libra, you are having a nodal return. 2023 and 2024, and probably to some degree the beginning of 2025, talks about a bigger story arc that's always been present in your life. If you have the south node in Libra, relationships are a default. You default, it is your instinct to do things with other people. Well, you said, Katie, relationships are important. I know. But the arc is to find your individuality, north node in Aries, to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, to be able to do it yourself. I remember this client that I had, and we started working with each other after her husband died, and she had never taken care of herself, paid the bills and did the stuff because the husband always sort of took care of that stuff. It's just an example of, in your own in your own life, how this is relevant to you. But it's sometimes scary when we have to strike out alone. We have to figure it out on our own. And there is a power in being able to find it within ourselves, Aries, to be able to do it. And it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of bravery. Before I go into this part, if it's the other way around, you're having what's called a nodal opposition, and it means that the 2023-2024 time frame, it's something may come into your life, an event, a theme, something that really is trying to talk about this bigger need for relationship and partnership in your life, and needing to look at where you typically are too independent. You don't always reach out to other people, and needing to find balance with that. For this slide, what if a planet is at the same degree as the eclipse? So 21 degrees of Libra is the solar eclipse, 5 degrees of Taurus. For the lunar eclipse, if you have major planets, a major planet is a sun, a moon, an angle, your ascendant, your descendant, your midheaven, your IC. If you have a planet, and this is where you have to know a bit more astrology, if you have a planet that governs the sun or the moon or governs one of those 4 angles, that planet has a lot of power and status in your life. Something about that part of your life is changing. The closer the eclipse, typically the conventional wisdom is that the bigger the change. I have to see. But like I said, an eclipse can foretell a marriage, or the birth of a child, sort of these major life milestones that we all have as human beings. What if my birthday is on an eclipse? So for those that are born at the end of April, you're having a lunar eclipse on your sun. For those that are born on the 14th of October, plus or minus, you're having a solar eclipse on your birthday. Even though those people that have the sun at 21 plus or minus degrees of Scorpio, and as these words are leaving my mouth, I'm like, wait a second, my Scorpio sun is that 20, not 20 degrees Scorpio, 21 degrees of Aries. Sorry, 21 degrees of Aries is the other side of this solar eclipse. So that would roughly correspond with sort of the middle of Aries. So like the 14th, 12th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 14th, 15th of Aries. It's not an exact, because anyway, signs. So if your birthday is on an eclipse, it says that the next year is going to be a powerful turning point. If it is a solar eclipse in your birthday, something about the next year is going to be brand new. I don't know what. You'll have to get back to me. If you're old enough, you had a solar eclipse on October 14th of 2004. What changed, if anything? If you have a lunar eclipse on your birthday, something, and sometimes around the time of your birthday, not always, something about the coming year is dramatic. I realize that word is dramatic. It just means that life is a bit loud, or life is about big capital L life, a move, a change in your direction, a change in a relationship. These are the things that are capital L life. We're at the beginning of a story. The first eclipse was again April 20th of 2023. We're not going to really come to the conclusion of this chapter until March of 2025. And that's when we have our last Aries solar eclipse. So if something's playing out, it may continue to play out throughout 2024 and into the beginning of 2025. Eclipses are not one size fit all. So the information that I'm giving you all today, it's obviously pretty general. I mean, not so general that you can't, take something from it for yourself. It's to kind of give you these bigger points about eclipses and why eclipses are so important, but you really need your own, like you need to know your chart, or an astrologer looks at your charts. So that's where, in the specificity of your own astrology, it is about relationships, but what part of your astrology is Libra? Is there a planet at 21 degrees? What does that planet govern? I know that these are technical points for those that don't really know astrology, but these are just broad strokes, and maybe you will see, and hopefully you will see, echoes in your own life. But to get the clearer picture, that's where you need to know your personal astrology. So let's start with Aries. Aries, so we've got a solar eclipse in the 7th house, your 7th sign, and we have a lunar eclipse in your 2nd house. This is going to put Mars in your 8th, Venus in your 6th, Saturn in your 12th. So you had a solar eclipse in your sign back on April 20th. Even though that eclipse was at the very end of Aries, it said to you that the next 6 months, if not the next year plus, is going to be a time of powerful new beginnings. The other side of the sky from Aries is Libra. So now the narrative changes. It's starting to focus on relationships, partnerships. These two parts of the chart, you and other people, these are big, like, chapter heads in your life. The eclipse that we had on April 20th, 2023, it's kind of curious to think about it, but Mars, which governed the eclipse, was in Cancer. Maybe over the last 6 months, you saw changes in the household, you saw changes in home, maybe like something about home and family, past and memories. Now it's the next part of the chapter. So very classic things that can happen with a solar eclipse in the 7th is that it's a new relationship, or it's an event in an existing relationship. And for some people, not always, the event is the end of the relationship, if that's something that is relevant, of course. I've used this example a few times now, but I know an Aries who has Libra rising, and he's going to be a father next month or within the next couple of weeks, whenever the baby is due. So that's an event. The birth of a child is an event in the relationship. Of course, there's other examples. It doesn't have to be children, but it's a very kind of traditional and classic example. Even if you have 0 committed relationships in your life, the focus is on other people. People are coming in and out of your life. Because Venus, which governs the eclipse, is in the 6th, there may be these bigger themes about needing to help people. Whether to be of service, whether to give your time, whether to help fix a situation. Virgo is certainly a sign that likes to fix. You do have Saturn in the 12th, and this is sort of a bigger arc of your life, Aries, that takes you into 2026, where it's a very spiritual time for you. It's a time of letting go, releasing, trying to figure out what's important. And I'm just using the child example. It's like if you become a father for the first time, or you become a mother for the first time, your priorities shift, and the things that you thought were important are not important anymore. You have to think about the bigger picture. So maybe that's one way Saturn is showing up in Pisces. But even if it's the end of a relationship, or maybe a relationship pattern or something from the past in relationship, how do you find peace? How do you let go? It's my doggy. How do you really find some compassion? And it's because Virgo, especially when it comes to relationships, can talk about relationship inequity, is to look at if there is any inequity in your current capital R relationships, and even your small r relationships, because Virgo has a big heart, but it will put everybody else first. To that point, either you need to rectify that imbalance, or you need to look at where you're in a phase of your life where it is a little bit about self-sacrifice, and I mean that in the best possible way, for the greater good, and the greater good of something, whether that's a personal thing, whether that's a spiritual thing, for example. We do have that last eclipse in Taurus. Taurus for Aries is the money sign, the 2nd sign. And this concludes a chapter where there has been a lot of focus on money, property, investments, purchases, spending, and even into more abstract themes about value and worth. What's of value? With Uranus there, and this is not going to be the case for every Aries. Maybe there's been some instability with money and the material, or maybe you've needed to completely make money in a way that's different than you've typically made money in the past. To be fair, Mars governs you. It's your planet, Aries. It's going to be in Scorpio. Scorpio is the other side to Mars. There's Mars in Aries, Mars in Scorpio. It's about not just courage and bravery. Aries is physical courage and bravery. It's the courage and bravery to lead, to take command. But in Scorpio, it's inner courage, it's inner bravery. There's a psychological element to Mars and Scorpio. There's elements about power, intimacy, trust, vulnerability, that's going to really come up over the next 6 months, if not before. But Mars it makes you feel, and Scorpio can make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, although it is in its own sign. It's a very powerful placement for Mars. So you can use this energy to really get into more deeper and intimate spaces within yourself. And that, of course, is going to shift relationships. Taurus and Taurus rising. So this is going to be a 6th house and a 1st house eclipse. We're going to have the solar eclipse in the 6th. The 1st will be the lunar eclipse, puts a U in the spotlight, and Venus governs you. So Venus is a big player in this eclipse for you, Taurus. So this is closing out a dynamic chapter of change, and I would even say transformation, because Scorpio is the other side of Taurus's axis, that began in 2021. And a lot of that change focused on you, it focused on relationships. And these are changes that honestly have their roots in the last 4 or 5 years, 2020, 2018 and 2019, when Uranus first went into Taurus. Every Taurus and Taurus rising is going to live this time differently. It's to see how relationships changed over the last 18 months. How did you change over the last 18 months? But that said, this is a full moon on the 28th that puts you in the spotlight, especially if you were born on or around April 25th. It says that life might be a little bit interesting at the moment. You're in the spotlight, for better or for worse, and to see what's the bigger story arc that's happening right now. Where do you feel a sense of conclusion as you start to come to the end of this eclipse cycle? Lunar eclipses, they're dramatic. They demand we take action. They are a full moon, times whatever. They can bring events. They can also, in this case, bring an event and relationship. We have the Mars in Scorpio with this eclipse. We have, so maybe there's something that's happening because the sun will be in Scorpio at the time between you and other people, and getting into themes about power and control and moving forward and breaking free, and maybe needing to find your individuality, for example. Venus, which is the ruler of the eclipse, will be in Virgo throughout October. So we've got a lot of focus on what's called your 5th sign. For some people, especially because the relationships are highlighted with these eclipses, the 5th sign can talk about children. It can talk about the birth of children. Of course, that's not going to be relevant for everybody, but this eclipse does get into these bigger questions of identity. Who are you? And certainly, who are you within the context of relationships? Do you really open up to somebody? Maybe you need to really affirm yourself, or affirm your individuality, or affirm your personality. For example, the opposition between Saturn and Neptune, they're over in the 11th, and the 11th talks about friends, society, community, humanity. It's relationships. It's not just personal one-on-one relationships. It's also relationships with the greater whole, your community, the people that you connect with, your social network. And maybe needing to make some decisions, like who are the people that you want around you? Like, where do you fit in? Do you need to really build relationship and connection on a bigger framework at this time? Saturn in the 11th can be a little brutal for friendships, because Saturn has very exacting standards. So see who is coming in and out of your life around this eclipse, and where a relationship can get deeper, but certainly any frenemies or toxic relationships may have to go with this lunar eclipse. The Libra solar eclipse, it opens up a chapter, it's called this, it's your 6th sign. It's the sign of health and wellness and work and projects and service and helping other people. This is not going to be relevant for every Taurus, but it's just to put on your radar that the eclipse in Libra and certainly the eclipse in Aries back in April and the ones to come in 2024, these are health related eclipses. If you need to, if you've not been attending to your health, maybe be proactive. Maybe use this time to make a positive change, eclipse, in your health and wellness. It can also get into themes of service to one another, earthly service, practical service, spiritual service. The eclipse is to come in Aries, which is your 12th. With Venus opposite Saturn, because Venus is your planet, it governs you. There may be a demand to take on more duties and responsibilities, take a step up. Saturn loves it when we do the mature, responsible thing. And as a result, there may be a call for you to do the mature and responsible thing around these eclipses and even into the next 6 months. Gemini and Gemini rising. So these are 5th and 12th house eclipses, and then Mercury being your planet, we have to see what Mercury is doing during the eclipses. So in this solar eclipse, we have a new beginning. It's in your 5th, but that new beginning the 5th really talks about identity and self, meaning what makes you you. There is only one you in this world, and maybe on some level you're like, okay, well, who am I? Like, what's my identity? What are the things that light me up and give me passion? Maybe it's a need to prioritize creativity over the next 6 months. Mercury, which is you, will be in Libra at the time of the eclipse, with the 5th being a space of children and pregnancy. I'm just saying this for those for whom this is relevant. This might be an eclipse period that brings a greater focus on children, and for some, maybe even a pregnancy. Venus opposes Saturn, and Venus is in your 4th, and so it kind of on a similar level, it picks up on these themes of home and family roots and foundation. So we see this thing about creativity, children, self, home, family, putting down roots, creating a base. Venus opposite Saturn, it really, especially because Saturn is in your 10th, you are in a period, Gemini, and of course all Geminis are going to live this differently, where it is about like sort of the bigger stepping stones in your life right now, like responsibilities, stepping up, really making sure everything is in alignment with whatever path that you want to go to. Saturn, even though Saturn is not the major focus of these eclipses, it's just worth noting that it is activating your 10th career. Career is both your work and what you do out in the world, but it could be a time when you need to take your creative talents, gifts, and abilities and make them real, make them concrete, and put them out into the world. With the Taurus lunar eclipse that's on the 28th, Taurus for you is something called your 12th. You, between Taurus in the 12th and even Saturn in your 9th, 2020 through 2023, you're starting to come out of a time that's really been existential. Why am I here? What am I doing? What is my purpose? What is my meaning for being? And the 12th is a very quiet, sacred place for retreat and reflection. And for some, that might be a time when you're sort of going in October, November, where you need to go into retreat. You need to spend some time alone. You need to search yourself for sort of the answers to these bigger questions. Because it's a lunar eclipse and because it's the 12th, this might be a time when you need to let something go. The 12th is where our physical life goes this way, our spiritual life goes this way. What do I mean? Well, we can't take our physical bodies with us. We can't take the physical world with us. It's important, it's a support. but we need to leave the things behind that don't serve us, that doesn't nourish us, doesn't nourish our spirit. For some people, not all, this could be a time when you need to let go of something like an attachment or even an addiction. And certainly you can work with the lunar eclipse to really be like, all right, I'm going to stop doing X, Y, whatever X and Y is for you. With Venus in the fourth, Venus governs both the solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse. It may bring up emotions from the past, memories. Am I safe? Can I move forward? But the 12th is where we store our emotional and even psychic and spiritual baggage. And I think that if you wanted to be proactive, Gemini, it's to really get very clear about what you want to bring with you into the next 6 to 12 months and what you want to leave behind, because certainly this lunar eclipse is giving you an opportunity to leave something behind. Cancer and Cancer rising. So these are big eclipses for Cancer and Cancer rising. And even though you're not a Libra or Aries, Libra and Aries are the axis to your chart. Like they are the backbone to your chart. So this is a major eclipse cycle, and it's one that will focus on home and family, career, and direction over the next year and into the beginning of 2025. First, you had the Aries solar eclipse back on April 20th. That was in your career sign. So maybe you saw a big focus on your professional life. Maybe you saw a career change. Maybe you saw a career like pivot. And maybe it was you stepped into a time in your life where you really needed to take the reins. Mars at the time of that eclipse was in Cancer. Hey, you're Cancer. But this eclipse that's on the 14th of October, it's on the other side. It's on the base, the bottom, the foundation. It's home and it's family. We can't have a public life. We can't have ambitions. We can't have a career without a stable anchor point, home and family. Of course, home and family mean different things to different people. From a very traditional way of looking at the eclipse, there could be changes in your residency or household over the next 6 months. And it's possible, and I have a client that I'm thinking about who's Cancer rising, the change of residency has already happened. It's a move. Somebody moves in and somebody moves out. Or it's a need to really prioritize home and family over the next 6 to 12 months, because we can't always, it's just what Libra teaches us, just as an archetypical sign. We just can't be so focused on career that we forget about our base and our foundation. It's like working 60-hour work weeks day in and day out, and then you're like I'm burnt out. Well, of course you are, because you haven't been tending to your roots, your home, your family, and your foundation. That's another way of looking at it. And it could mean that your life is pivoting at the moment. Venus, because it governs both eclipses, and Venus is in the third for both eclipses, there's something about movement, there's something about choices, having to weigh your options, having to make serious choices in the case of Venus opposite Saturn. The third is also, it could be a move, a local move. It doesn't have to be a long distance move. It could be something in the case of family and siblings, because the third talks about siblings. And maybe there's a focus also about education and how you need to get the education, whether that really nourishes your home environment or it really sets you up for the eclipses to come in May and April of 2024. But like I said, this is a big pivot point for you, Cancer and Cancer rising. On the other side of things, you have a lunar eclipse in your 11th, and this is closing out a chapter since 2021 that's put the spotlight on friends, community, your social network, the people that you have alliances with. And this even involves groups. There is this natural human need not only to be in relationship, but to find alliances, to find like-minded people. Of course, these can be friends, but these could be people that are rallied behind a similar cause or aim. For some cancers, the past 18 months, if not more, have gotten into social issues and social causes. Keep in mind that Uranus has been here since 2018, 2019. So this is about a broader period of your life where people come into your life, friends, community, people who are allies, who are quite possibly very different than anybody you've ever encountered, and people that are trying to awaken you in some way. Because the other side of the coin is Mars and Scorpio, and Mars is going to be in your fifth. So this gets into these bigger themes. Well, who are you? Who are you, and how is that represented in the world? Of course, if you're looking for people who have the similar interests, then you need to sort of really identify what those interests are for you. Maybe there's a tension point. Maybe you have friends in your life or community where you don't feel like you fit in or belong. But there is a sense of creativity and self-expression, and maybe even taking the best of you, your talents, your gifts, your abilities, and putting them out into your community or sharing them with the world. Saturn is in the ninth, and I think it's worth saying that because Venus does make that opposition to Saturn, that this is a larger period in your life that began about March, where you're trying to figure out, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? What's your faith? What's your truth? What's your philosophy? Self and identity and philosophy, these are things that we can't touch, but we know that they exist. And so it's a little bit apart from the things about home and family and career, those things, belonging and sort of what's my sense of mission and purpose in the world? How do I want to give back? What sort of motivates and propels me? These are things that kind of get into these bigger existential questions. And as a result, you may be seeing these existential questions come up with these eclipses. Leo and Leo rising. So these are going to be a 3rd and 10th house eclipse for you, Leo. The lunar eclipse of October 28th is the one that's the more dramatic one for you. This is opening up a new time, and it actually plays off the solar eclipse that we had on April 20th. That's really focusing on education. That can come in a lot of different forms. For some Leo and Leo risings, that's literal. You are going back to school, you're taking more classes, you're trying to educate yourself, you're reading books, you're delving deeper into some sort of study or practice, for example. For some Leos, it's been the time to be the teacher, to share what you know, to share what you believe and what you think is true. With the Libra eclipse, it's sort of as the counter to the eclipse in April. It's like you need to get back to the ideas, the information, like what sort of builds what you believe in and what you stand for. On a different way of looking at it, the next 6 months and beyond, you are really focusing on writing, speaking, communication. Maybe you're starting a manuscript, maybe you're doing more public speaking. Maybe you need to really re-examine, because South Node in Libra, re-examine how you use your voice. Do you use your voice in a way that is constructive or destructive, for example, or needing to find your voice? And I've said this at different points, and certainly with clients or certainly with my Facebook Lives, like voice is 2 things. Voice is the words out of your mouth, but it's also your ability to inhabit those words. I mean, you take what is inside of you and you put it into your words. If you're a Leo, even if you are Leo rising, sort of the raison d'etre of your life is to be the sun. It's to shine. It's to share yourself with the world. It's not to be the sun for other people, but it's to sort of show people like what is unique about you. And it's not to hide it, even if you are a shy Leo. That said, Venus is a major planet in your astrology. It's a career planet for you. Wait, that's not correct. Let's do the math. Yes, it is a career planet for you. So with Venus opposite Saturn, there may be elements of career that are very prominent throughout October for you. It could be a job change. It could be more duties and responsibilities. It could mean that you need to step up and do the mature and responsible thing. Saturn, it could mean that you are getting recognition for hard work, and now you have a title to go along with it, Saturn. But Saturn does sort of put a little bit of like, I gotta grow up, I gotta get my stuff in order vibe to both these eclipses. And Saturn being Saturn, maybe for some Leos, you get the hard no, you get the stop, you get the, hey, go back to the drawing board and do it differently. Solar eclipse in the third, and get a new perspective. For example, the lunar eclipse that's on the 28th, it is the last eclipse in Taurus, and Taurus is your career sign. So the career sign, it talks about literally the things that we do in the world, like what do people see us as, what's our ambition, where are we taking our life. I've said this, certainly I've said it in my weekly videos, Leo, you're 5 years into a 7-year chapter of reinventing your professional life. That can mean different things to different Leos, but that sort of push to do something different, to reinvent yourself, to do a different career, or to even have a breakout or breakthrough in your existing career may really come to the surface with this lunar eclipse. With Mars, and Mars is in its own sign, it's down in your fourth, you sort of have this push and pull between your inner life, your home life, your outer life, your professional life, and maybe something about home and family, and certainly responsibilities and duties in the world may also come up at this time. And I think it's worth saying, because Saturn is in your eighth until 2026, you are doing a lot of emotional inner psychic work over the next few years. And this may, sorry, I'm just making sure everybody has the link. And this may bring a time in your life where it's really pushing you to make some positive changes in your emotional health and wellness. Virgo and Virgo rising. So this is going to be a second house and ninth house eclipses. So let's start with the Libra solar eclipse. This is a new chapter. It's going to be one that focuses on money and income and material stability and security over the next 6 months. It does play off of that solar eclipse that we had on April 20th, 2023 in the eighth. The second and the eighth are the money spaces in our astrology. So it's very much about money and finance and investments. For some Virgos, this is about really attending to your material life. You are focused on your income over the next 6 months. You're trying to make more money. You're trying to address something that's already an existing issue. Maybe you're making purchases. Maybe you're buying a home, buying property. Maybe it's not something that dramatic. Maybe you're just really trying to invest more in your material life. I will say Mars was through this space since the end of August. So maybe you're already seeing themes about money and income and spending come up throughout September. With your planet, Mercury is also going to be in the second. And I think with that, you need to take, it's like take commands or take the lead around something about money, income, purchases, and investing over the next 6 months. And Mercury, and I think also with Jupiter in the mix, like this might, talk about in Saturn the seventh, like needing to do this with another person. So if you're in a partnership, whether that's a romantic partnership, whether that's just a business partnership, maybe it's you and another person really looking at assets and finance. And to be fair, the eighth, which is where we had the eclipse back in April, the eighth is where we have the estate planning, wills, and I'm being Scorpio for the moment, but these things are important. With Venus and Virgo, opposite Saturn in your relationship sign, that's where you see that this is not just an eclipse about you and your money, it's about somebody else in your life. It could be a partner, it could be, again, some other type of partnership in your life, but you're both trying to figure something out. And it could mean that this is a solar eclipse that does talk about a major life milestone, or to Saturn needing to get real and serious about something. On the other side of things, with the lunar eclipse in your ninth, this is a lunar eclipse that kind of gets into these bigger abstract themes. What's my philosophy? It could be, what's my philosophy around money? What's my philosophy around spending? Like, what's of value? What's not important? And I think with Venus, which will be in Virgo, you have to get very philosophical at this time. You need to kind of figure out what's your truth, what's your convictions, what do you stand for. Do keep in mind that the ninth has been a space where you've seen a lot of change over the last 4 or 5 years. Uranus went into your ninth back in 2018, 2019. This is going to be different for every Virgo, but this is about opening up your eyes to the world. It could be a revelation about what you believe in, what you stand for, and maybe what you believed in 2018, 2019 is not what you believe in right now. Maybe because the ninth is a space of education, you need to educate yourself about something. It could be about money, it could be about finance, it could be about investments, it could be needing to educate yourself about the things that are important in your material life, or it could just be education in general. But you had eclipses here. Sorry, my dog keeps putting his paws on my leg. You had eclipses here, 2021, starting in 2021. So this really heightened this sort of larger question about, okay, what's true for me? Like, how do I want to align my life? Do I want to actually buy this? Maybe if, it's not in alignment with what I really truly value after all. Libra and Libra rising. So this is a powerful time for you, Libra and even Libra rising. So this is what's called a first house eclipse. The eclipse is in your sign, or it's in the sign of your rising. And on the other side of things, it's an 8th house eclipse. That Taurus lunar eclipse will be the final 8th house eclipse. So this is a dynamic chapter that began with an Aries solar eclipse on April 20th of 2023. Aries for you is relationships. And so it's for you in your own time, Libra, to see like what's been the story with relationships over the past 6 months, and maybe even since the beginning of the year. If you are in an existing relationship, have you seen changes in the partnership? Have there been milestones in the relationship? That said, having a solar eclipse in your sign, especially if your birthday is on or near October 14th, or if your rising sign is on or near 21 degrees of Libra, you are going into a 6-month chapter where it's something about new beginnings. For some, it may be a dramatic new beginning. For some, the new beginning means that you need to like stand on your own. You need to like be the leader. I keep using this example because it seems to be a good illustration, but if you're becoming a parent for the first time, of course, you're hopefully doing that with another person, but it does require you to stand up, to stand into a role and stand into a position. With the lunar eclipse in Taurus in your 8th, with Venus in Virgo, and even Venus, the ruler of the solar eclipse, and your ruler, there's something about endings that are wrapped up with this new beginning. To use the example of becoming a parent, it is an ending. You are no longer a singular individual person. You now are a mother, a father. You now have to take responsibility, not just for a child, but also for the partnership and the support of the family unit. If that's not relevant, what needs to end so that something else can begin? Does it mean an old relationship has to end so a new relationship has to begin? Does it mean that you need to let go of some sort of relationship pattern or something that you're holding on from the past in order to be able to move forward? Because the first is ultimately about moving forward, taking the lead, taking action. Venus is in Virgo, Saturn is in your sixth, the 12th Virgo, the sixth Pisces for you, Libra, talks about service. There's other ways to look at it, of course, but you may see themes about service and having to be of service to other people, having to really put other people's needs into the mix. You can't always think about yourself, even though you have to be the adult in the room at the moment. If it's not service, it could be healing, health, and wellness, meaning you have to look at your physical health, Saturn, but you also need to look at your emotional and spiritual health, Virgo. It could also mean a spiritual service. With the 12th, it's like, well, how do I align my life so it feels like it's in alignment with a sense of deeper purpose and meaning? That said, the lunar eclipse on October 28th is in your eighth, and this is the last eclipse in the eighth, and this is sort of building off of a larger period since 2018, 2019, where the eighth has been a space of awakenings and change. Now, here's the irony, is that there's already a space of awakenings and change, because the eighth is where we are confronted by life. The eighth is where we have to face ourselves. The eighth is where we have to do our deeper psychological work. So maybe there's a lot of deep emotions coming up at this time. Maybe it's, to sort of look at that dynamic with the 12th, whatever these deep emotions are, maybe it's time to release them, heal them, let them go, and try to find peace with the past, if that is even possible. But the eighth is also a money space. It's finance, investments. It's the money and assets between two people, whether it's a serious relationship, whether it's a marriage, whether it's a business partnership. The eighth is also where we do estate planning. It's the assets that you have that you cannot bring with you into the next life, but we got to figure out what to do with them. So this is something where it's about money and assets and investments and finance, and really, letting something go so that you can prepare for a brand new chapter in your life. Scorpio and Scorpio rising. So these are 12th and 7th house eclipses. So you may have noticed that the last eclipse in Scorpio was back just this past May, and you're not going to have another eclipse in Scorpio until 2031. Hooray! But now the eclipses are starting to go in your 12th. And the 12th, because the eclipses moved backwards, it moved from the 1st to the 12th. The 12th is the space of endings. It's the end of your personal zodiac wheel. It can be a very spiritual place for some people. It can also be a space where you're really spending a lot of time with yourself, trying to figure out what do you believe in? What do you stand for? Not because a book is telling you to believe a certain thing, but where you have to really sit with yourself. It can be a very quiet time, a very introspective time. The last time you had eclipses in your 12th would have been 2014 and 2015, and I believe there was one last eclipse in your 12th in March of 2016. But this is closing out a dynamic chapter of change that started in 2021, but quite honestly, because Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018, 2019, a period that's been a period of change and transformation that has been with you over the last 5 years. I think in your own time, Scorpio, look back at life in 2021. What were the narrative, like the points of the narrative? Like, who were the characters? Who came in and out of your life in 2021 and even 2022? Because for you, in the October 28th lunar eclipse, it is the last eclipse in your relationship sign for another 9 years. And so maybe the people who you were in relationship and partnership with, or the people who were in your life in the start of 2021 or in the start of 2018, 2019 are not in your life anymore. It's been ironically a time that's been about new beginnings, but also new beginnings wrapped in endings. So with that said, this is a time to focus on relationship, not just romantic relationship, but all relationships. And I think especially because Venus is the ruler of both eclipses, it's in your 11th, to look at the role of friendship and community in your life. Venus is opposite Saturn. How do you build new friendships? How do you build new community? How do you build community with people that have a deeper spiritual purpose and alignment with you? Maybe you need to get very clear about an existing friendship. Maybe it's time to, cut somebody out of your life because they're just not a positive influence. But that said, Mars is going to be in your sign during these eclipses. So there's a lot of power and strength and new beginnings that are very much focused on you. Right now, as I record this, Mars is still in Libra. Mars is still in the 12th. You are still behind the scenes, but there's sort of this endings and new beginnings that are in these eclipses, because as that solar eclipse goes into the 12th, we have Mars in the space of leadership, new beginnings, taking action, moving forward, courage and bravery. And there's a very dynamic axis of planets that are between Taurus and Scorpio. So it's probably going to be a very interesting October for you, and even into November, your birthday season, I would argue. And for some Scorpios, this is the opening of a very deeply introspective and spiritual chapter. And maybe for some Scorpios, a time to really look at the role of intuition, spirituality, spiritual practices in your life, and also letting go of anything that you just don't need with you into the next big chapter of your life. Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising. So these are 11th house and 6th house eclipses. Sag, these eclipses aren't hitting the big marks like they are with the other signs. However, you do have Venus and Saturn opposing each other, and Saturn is in your sign of home and family, and Venus is in your sign of career. So this could be an eclipses plural, that really talk about one of the major axes of your life, meaning where is home, where is family, who is home, who is family, what's going on in your professional life, who are the allies and the professional allies, the allies in general, in terms of building, your life and building your career, for example. But let's start with this solar eclipse that's going to be on the 14th. It's in your 11th. So Libra is your 11th sign, and it says that over the next 6 months, this is a chapter that's very much focused on friends, community, society, humanity. Because Libra is a social sign, maybe you're seeing people come in and out of your life. Maybe it's a time to create new groups, especially people who are in alignment with a cause that you are interested in, or are having to have a positive influence in the world. With Venus in the 10th, this could also mean that you are being asked to take more of a leadership and responsibility role in a group or in your community. Of course, this is not going to be for everybody, but making sure that the people that you're in alignment with, like these people, do you really hold the same tenets and values, for example. The lunar eclipse that's going to be on the 28th, this is a 6th house eclipse. This is the last eclipse in your space of health and wellness, work and projects for another, till 2031. Keep in mind, and every Sag has been living this time differently, but you are 5 years into a 7-year chapter of reinventing your relationship with your physical body and your physical life. For some Sagittariuses, this has been a time to make some positive changes in your health and wellness, diet, fitness, nutrition. For some Sagittarius, they've had to actually deal with an issue, a health issue, for example. The eclipses for some have been a positive motivation, and for others, they've really created events that sort of really brought a lot of focus and attention on health and wellness and projects. That said, this is the last one. I'm just saying this in case that there has been something about health and wellness that's very much followed these eclipses over the past year and a half, if not longer. But it could be a time when you have to make a decision about something health and wellness related. It could be something making, again, positive changes in fitness, diet, and nutrition. It could even talk about the completion of a project and something that you've been working on over the last couple of years. Because Scorpio and Taurus are the axes in your chart that also talk about service, there could be elements of service, serving other people, and even serving your community and spirituality into the next 6 months. The 12th, which is where we find Mars, and Mars is the action drive of the chart, it could speak to a time over the next 6 months where you need to either pull away from the world, you need to recuperate. I know that's a little bit ironic because it also talks about community and career and more responsibilities. But this could also be something that you're doing in a more of a quiet atmosphere with people that really are in alignment with a bigger purpose and cause in your life. It is worth mentioning, and also to go back to the 12th is where we try to really figure out what we believe in, and not the belief of a book, not the belief that somebody tells us, but it's the belief that comes from doing a lot of inner searching and meaning, or searching for inner purpose and meaning. For example, Saturn, which is the it's not kind of the major focus of these eclipses, but it's important because it's being activated. It's down in your 4th, so there could be something about family, the household, your living situation, having to make a decision about a move, or having to take on more duties and responsibilities in your household, or maybe even having to take care of a parent. Capricorn and Capricorn rising. So these are 10th and 5th house eclipses, and these are actually major eclipses for you. Aries and Libra forms the axis of your, like the backbone of your chart. So you are having a solar eclipse in Libra, and Libra is your career sign. It says that, there's a lot of different pragmatic ways to look at this, but over the next 6 months, something is going to change in your professional life. Either you get a new job, or it's a new chapter, or it's a career change. Maybe you get a new job, or maybe sometimes something else happens. You don't have a job anymore. But with Venus, the ruler of the eclipse, in your 9th, there's something about either education that's very much in tandem with your career. You need to take more classes, you need to go back to school, you need a degree, you need specialized training, or you need to make sure that either your professional life, or sort of the direction that you're taking your life and the duties and responsibilities that you are carrying, are very much in alignment with your values, or what you stand for, what you believe in, what you think is true. There's a little bit of some existential searching with these eclipses, and these existential searching is more focused on the external world, like philosophy, religion, books, trying to figure out like different perspectives and different points of view. For example, this is a continuation of that solar eclipse that we saw on April 20th, down in something called your 4th. It was a change in the household. It was a focus on home and family, even starting a family, or a major sort of personal milestone in your life. That said, with the lunar eclipse that's going to be in Taurus, Taurus is your fifth. And so this is really touching on this larger story in your life over the last 18 months, but if not, since 2018, 2019, where it's been a reinvention of self. Of course, every Capricorn is going to live this time differently. It's who are you? And Capricorn typically is a very much like follow the rules, do what you're supposed to do, and sometimes takes on a lot of family programming, societal programming that it has to be a certain way. But with Uranus in the fifth, this has been the need to rediscover the real self. The real self is outside of cultural overlay, outside of familial or ancestral patterns and programming. It's sort of this revelation of something that's within you. This is the last eclipse in Taurus until 2031. And for some Capricorns, the sense of self and identity also talks about creativity, creative projects. And for some Capricorns, talks about children and pregnancy. Of course, that's not going to be relevant for everybody, but when you start to see the 10th and the 4th, you start to see the 5th all sort of activated. Sometimes for some, this really is a very traditional look at it, where it is about the start of a relationship, the start of a family, the start of a household, for example. With Saturn in your third, and Saturn is you, and Saturn is opposing Venus, the eclipses, there could be something about major choices, having to make a serious choice. It could be a serious choice that really has to be in alignment with your faith or your truth, or a choice that really sets up your life direction. There's a lot of like subtext to that, because it just means different things to different people. But I think with the 3rd and 9th being activated, whatever choices that you make, they need to be well informed. Almost to the end. Aquarius and Aquarius rising. So these are 9th and 4th house eclipses. For you, this is not necessarily, except for the lunar eclipse that's going to be on the 28th, like you are starting to come out of a little bit of a dramatic time in your life, Aquarius. 2020, 2021, 2022, you had Saturn in Aquarius, and the beginning of 2023, this was a lot of heavy energy. Uranus, you had the Uranus Saturn square in the 4th, and then you had eclipses in your 4th throughout, starting in November 2021, that said that something about home and family and the household may have changed over the last couple of years. Somebody moves in, somebody moves out. It's the start of a family. It's a move, or it's a need to really focus on your home environment over the past 18 months. That said, this solar eclipse is in your 9th, and the 9th is the space that really talks about our sense of faith, our sense of truth, our philosophy, the sort of the education, or sometimes even the religious frameworks that really shape how we see the world. Of course, every Aquarius is going to live this differently, but when the 9th is really highlighted, it's not like there's not a lot of concreteness about that, because you can't touch philosophy unless you write a book. This really kind of gets into these bigger questions. Well, like, how do you see the world? Do you need to change how you see the world? Is this a time in your life where you need more philosophy, you need more seeking, you need more travel, you need more exploration? Because the 9th is also not just about education, it's about foreign travel and long distance journeys. So maybe over the next 6 months, you're doing a lot of traveling. Maybe it's just travel, it doesn't have a lot of deeper subtext to it, but maybe for some, it's travel because you're trying to find something. The 9th is where we go on a quest. We're searching for something. It could be physical, it could be spiritual or philosophical or religious in nature. But there's the need for new horizons. And I think with Venus, the ruler of both eclipses in your 8th, whatever you are searching, whatever you're seeking, whatever you're exploring, it's getting into these deeper emotional points. The eighth is where deep emotions come up. It's the psyche, it's our fears, it's where we have to face ourselves, it's where we have to look at what we've been hiding from ourselves, for example. The eighth is also a money and finance space, and by extension, you do have Saturn, and Saturn is you, because Saturn governs Aquarius, in your second sign of money and income. So there is this big push and pull between you and your assets and what you own, and maybe the things that you have from a partnership, or maybe an inheritance, eighth, or in estate planning, finances, benefits, retirement planning. Like, there's just something about trying to set yourself up for the future. It could be a time when you are making more bigger purchases, but also a time when you need to look at debt and spending, or maybe just get very clear about what your financial plans are going forward, not just for yourself, but for the other people in your life for whom, of course, that's relevant. The final eclipse that's in the fourth, that's on October 28th. This could bring a matter to a head about a family member, about something about your household, something about your living situation, something about the past, something about ancestors. But whatever this is not our first eclipse in Taurus. So in theory, it's the closing out of something. It's the end of something. It's sort of maybe even closing out a pretty dynamic and honestly pretty stressful, with the Saturn-Uranus square that we had the past couple of years, chapter of your life. Also, Mars, and then we have the Sun in Scorpio, that there's going to be in your 10th. And so there's an element of, over the next 6 months, you need to look at your public life, you need to look at career, you need to look, even if you're retired, like what sort of defines the role that you are playing in the world? Like, where are you steering your life towards? Like, what are the duties and responsibilities that are being asked of you? And even the duties and responsibilities you're really, taking the lead to stand into. But of course, every Aquarius and Aquarius rising is going to live this differently, but it could mean that October, November are a dynamic time for you. Finally, Pisces. So Pisces, this is going to be an 8th house eclipse and also a 3rd house eclipse. So this is our first 8th house eclipse, our first eclipse in Libra. You haven't had an eclipse in the 8th since I guess March of 2016 was that last one. So what is the 8th? The 8th occupies a lot of different things, because you have to understand that every sign in the zodiac, and thus every space in your personal astrology, because you are all 12 signs, there has to be a space where we confront what's beyond this world, what's at the end of our lives, what's our legacy, what do we leave behind? And the 8th is also, from a psychological level, where we face ourselves. This is the way I sometimes frame the 8th for people. Imagine a life where you are never tested. Imagine a life where nothing happens. Do you grow? No. There has to be a time in your life where you do the inner work, where you have to confront your fears, even if those fears are just, complete, like boogeyman, like they're not real. And that's the thing. And then the 8th is where we have to sort of face our illusions and face our projections and the projections that we put upon other people. The 8th is where the lower S self, which is the ego, has to, air quotes, die in order for it to become the uppercase S self, which is the greater self. It's not necessarily the higher self, the universal self, but it's a self of wisdom and knowledge that is born from having done the stripping down and having done the inner work. For some Pisces, this is a very financial time for them. That is looking at estates, it is looking at inheritances, it is doing the planning, it is meeting with financial advisors. For some Pisces and Pisces rising, is to look at debt, to look at spending, to look at what sort of resources and assets that you can call upon, even if it includes insurance, life and policies, and even the insurance that comes through your work, if that is relevant to you. The Venus opposite Saturn is a pretty big one because Venus is going to be in Virgo, which is a relationship sign, and Saturn is in your sign. It's important to understand that even though Saturn is not the focal point of these eclipses, Saturn is in Pisces. You are a Pisces. And Saturn is a major player in your astrology going into the beginning of 2026. I'm saying this because the 8th sort of makes us feel life, and Saturn in our own sign means that we have to do the mature and responsible thing and take the step up. Sometimes when Saturn is in our sign, it can be a little bit lonely because we have to be the adult, we have to be the parent, we have to be the person who is stepping into that role, either for somebody that can no longer do it or because it's our time to step in that role. So see, what is the story around relationships? What is the story around intimacy, vulnerability, trust, opening up? For some people, this again, it's about money and income, and certainly the money and income you share with another person, even if that includes benefits and assets and inheritances. The lunar eclipse that's in the 3rd, it highlights a larger story that's not just been with you since 2021 when you had that first eclipse, but also since 2018 and 2019. This is 5 years into a 7-year chapter where you need to reinvent your voice. For some people, maybe you have not been using your voice. And honestly, the great majority of people on this planet do not use their voice. And I don't mean because they're quiet. I mean because whatever is inside of them is not matching what is coming out of their mouth. They are saying things because they're somebody else's words. It could be the words of a parent, the words like a social expectation. And so there's a time to really liberate your voice. Although this is the last eclipse in the space until 2031. Another way of looking at it, if it's not voice, maybe it's about writing, maybe it's about publishing. It could also be about education. And this is really beginning to conclude a time over the past couple of years that has really focused on education, whether you took classes, whether you went back to school, whether you got a degree, whether you just read everything that you could get your hands on. And for some Pisces, especially with that Mars in the 9th at the time of the eclipse, like maybe this is about publishing. Maybe it's about doing that public speaking. Maybe it's about doing that TED Talk. And sometimes with some clients, I'd like to use the device, like if you had to do a TED Talk, what would it be about? Because we get into things about legacy and death, air quotes, death, and sort of the cycles of life. It's like, what do you want to leave behind? Like, what's the wisdom and knowledge that you've discovered that's unique to you or unique to your own life experience? I realize it's a little bit abstract, but it's just such a big time in your life, Pisces, that October, and I would say more November, because when Saturn turns direct on November 4th, this is a big pivotal time for you, Pisces. So that is your look at the 12 signs, and this is our opportunity to ask questions. I don't believe that there have been any questions in the chat. If you have questions, you can either put them in the chat or you can turn on your camera. Oh, look, I've been talking for 2 hours. That's not that bad. Sometimes it was almost 3 hours. But yes, if there are no questions, I love eclipses. I love eclipses, and I'm saying that more on an academic level. They are fascinating. They are fascinating how they show that time is not just this singular moment in time, that the eclipse can show up before the eclipse can show up after the eclipse. And they really start to reveal, especially when you even sort of take this into account with Saturn, that there is sort of this spiral and arc of our life that eclipses sort of keep revisiting, keep sort of making events happen. And these are the events that build and shape our lives. This is why I don't necessarily like to, there's a lot of fear and like, oh my God, what's going to happen about eclipses? But your life still has to happen. Things have to happen. So how is this a time where, depending on where you learn these eclipses are going to be, where they are activating parts of your life and where you can maybe be proactive about that, but also know that there are things that are bigger than us. And eclipses surely remind us that there are things that are bigger than us. So doesn't look like there's any questions. So even if you are, oh wait, now we have some questions. Thank you, Christy. I appreciate you too. Christy's going to be in my Saturn Masterclass, where I'm doing a 12-week program because I need to talk about the importance of, not just the importance of Saturn, but to walk through the zodiac, which is the wheel of life. And you will have a completely different view on everything by the time that we get to the end of it. Tracy says that each previous eclipse has lost or cost her a job in some way. I hope it's hard to say, Tracy, because that it really depends on the specificities of your chart. I think that anytime the eclipses, especially the eclipses that have been in Taurus, they speak to that larger story of having Uranus in the 10th. So maybe the silver lining that comes through some of this instability is that this eclipse can reveal something that actually, either is a different career path or something that you've always wanted to do. Sometimes Uranus is just trying to remind you that life is short and that there's something that you actually really want to do. But I get it. Sometimes we have to pay the bills. The last two eclipses, I don't know if these were the eclipses that were in April and May, but we're starting to get out of that time period that had Aquarius and Leo it was very difficult to be Aquarius and Leo over the last few years. So that's starting to end. And I really do hope that that is the case for you too, Tracy. So yeah. That is your look at the eclipses of October of 2023. I appreciate you all. I hope you can join me for my Saturn Masterclass. I know that Christy's going to be there, and it's going to be a very special 12-week program that we do together. For those that are watching on the replay, thank you for watching. And you can always, if there's a question that comes up, you can always send me an email. But until the next time we do a webinar, but of course you can watch me every week and I do my live video. You can follow me on Facebook, on Instagram, sign up for my newsletter. Some of you are my clients. You can book a consultation with me. So I thank you very much, and I hope you all have a wonderful and illuminating eclipse season. Take care. Be well. Bye-bye.